I'm going to start off with the greetings of peace and blessings. Now I'm going to jump straight into it. Christian missionaries are notorious for lying. They pretend to be Muslims in order to win converts. It's sad because they know their book is filled with lies, and one of the biggest liars is Paul. Now, if we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20, this is probably why they do what they do and why they lie. They're very deceitful and lying people. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. Those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. Now we go to the next verse, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 21. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. So as you can clearly see, Paul teaches them to deceive. We see in 2 Thessalonians 2:11, if they want to say God is a deceiver and make up all these strawman arguments in their own Bible, it says their God deceives. But that's not the point of this argument. Whereas Muslims don't lie to get converts, we just preach the message and Allah guides them. We always tell the truth. In chapter 4, verse 135, it says, O you who believed, be precisely standing firm in justice, witness for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or your parents and relatives, whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever with what you do acquainted. Now here's a recitation of chapter 4, verse 135.
أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا.
Alright, I'm going to show you guys two clips. One is a Christian missionary by the name of Jay Smith, who's known for lying. He's been debunked by many YouTube channels. Every time he debates Muslims, he gets destroyed in the debates. There's a famous clip of him and Shabir Ali debating where Shabir Ali just humiliates Jay Smith on his beliefs about the Trinity and how monotheism in Islam is the truth. And I'm going to show you guys another clip by a young man by the name of Joshua Evans, who was a Christian who converted to Islam. And he talks about how the Christians lie and how they even write books on how to deceive people to try to get them to convert. Because they know their religion is a bunch of BS because their Bible's corrupted. So they're trying to corrupt people, but corruptful ways, as in lying. So I want you guys to see these clips and reflect upon it. Peace.
Let me give you an example of a C6 that I saw in Australia. 3 couples had just finished seminary there in Melbourne. They then went to become missionaries to the local community there in the center of Melbourne, the local Muslim community. So in order to do that, they took on a C6 model themselves. So these are evangelical Christians, Australian Christians, who have Bible degree behind them, who went and joined the Muslim community. They took on Muslim name, they wore Muslim dress, they moved into the community, they became part of the mosque, started teaching within the mosque. Because of their ability to understand scripture, they quickly rose up through the ranks and became, in one case, just underneath an imam of the mosque. One of my colleagues kept in contact with them, but they stopped all relationship with the Christian church, stopped all relationship with their own indigenous church. And this one of my friends who then would keep contact, the only contact they would have was with her. Well, actually, I was introduced to the antecedent to the Insider movement when I was going through Fuller Seminary, studying under Dr. Dudley Woodbury back in the 1980s, early 1980s. My wife and I were there getting a master's in Islamic studies before we were sent out to the country of Senegal, West Africa. And so we saw what was going on. We saw certainly the missionaries and certainly what the seminary was doing at that time. We were told at that time that it was, of course, the name insider didn't exist. It was more contextualization. I studied under Dr. Kraft and Dr. Hebert. So I studied under those who were, you might say, the fathers of the whole contextual movement. Both my wife and I went to Senegal assuming that we would use contextualization. It was the key word at that time. It was the key paradigm. We went to Senegal, West Africa. We found that the Muslims there wore grand boubous, so I bought many grand boubous. They're very expensive. There are these beautiful flowing robes with a beautiful filigree in the front, and they cost an awful lot of money. We were told we should go to the mosque, so we went to the mosque. We prayed with the Muslims in the mosque. We thought that this was being contextual. I grew a very long beard. I had a beard down to here. If you see pictures of back then, I looked fierce. And it was very contextual. I took on an Islamic name, a local name. So did my wife. So for all practical purposes, we thought we were culturally adapting, culturally contextualizing to Islam. And it didn't take very long before the Muslims started clapping me on the back and saying, "It's so good to see you've converted."
Kenneth Craig is the Anglican bishop of, anybody know? I doubt I don't want to trick you like that. He's the Anglican bishop of Al-Quds, of Jerusalem. He's the Anglican bishop of Jerusalem named Kenneth Craig. He wrote a book, and the reason I asked you if you know who he was, any of you ever heard of him? Kenneth Craig. If not, know him. He wrote a book called The Call of the Minaret. He wrote a book called The Call of the Minaret. And if you've not read that book, then you don't really know how a Christian thinks. This book, The Call of the Minaret, is a manual of how to convert Muslims to Christianity. It's a manual about how to convert Muslims to Christianity, and a crux of the manual teaches trickery. How to appear to be a Muslim, how to go to Muslim countries, how to learn their customs, learn their ways, walk the walk, talk the talk, and then secretly call them to Islam. All of the missionaries that are doing this throughout the world trace their understandings back to this guy Kenneth Craig. He's the father of this type of understanding. This is what missionaries are doing in Iraq. This is what missionaries are doing in Afghanistan. This is what missionaries are doing in Palestine. This is what missionaries are doing in Saudi Arabia under the cover, and many of them have been caught. We know of instances of some of them that have been caught trying to do this. And this is the one thing that I like, that I say, good for them. This is one thing that a Muslim is forbidden to do. We cannot even fight against them in this way because a Muslim is forbidden to lie. We are forbidden to, to hide ourselves and try to trick people and all of this type of foolishness. This is not becoming of a person of religion. But he wrote this book called The Call of the Minaret. Read it. Any of you that want to deal with the Muslim countries and how to help them against these type of missionary attacks, you should read this book, because it is being done. There are seminars in the United States, and I can't say in the UK because I don't know, but I guarantee you there are. But there are seminars being taught how to follow this manual, how to go to Muslim countries and appear to fit in and blend in and call people to Islam. These people that say they were so-called Muslims? These guys that say that I used to be a Muslim and I converted to Christianity, this and that. They're trained by these type of people. They were never Muslim. They are never Muslim, and I've been to a number of them, the prominent ones, lectures, and have basically blasted them out. Basically, just blasted them out. This guy, Riza Shah? Any heard of this Riza Shah, Why I'm Not a Muslim? He wrote the book, Why I'm Not a Muslim? None of you have heard of this guy? He wrote a very famous book. You can find it in bookstores called Why I Am Not a Muslim Anymore. He says that he was at one point in time, he was an Al-Azhari scholar. He was an Al-Azhari sheikh. Was a hafiz. And then he found Jesus. And he came to a conference with about 5 other people who said that they were Muslim. Grew up in Muslim homes and trained and all of this. And because I had a lecture called How the Bible Led Me to Islam. And they went and had a lecture the next week, How the Quran Led Them to Jesus. Little did they know I was still in the city. I was still in Houston. So I came to their lecture and I sit and I listen. Okay. I came and I sat and I listened to what they had to say and just waited. After all of the rubbish they gave no textual proof. Everything was about how they feel and how Jesus made them feel and how this made them feel and how that made them feel. Not only did I say, well, making you feel good is no evidence for anything, because the drug addict will say the drugs make them feel good. But I asked them, I said, I have one question. If any of you can answer it for me, then I'll agree with all of you. I said, actually, I'll ask you two questions. They said, okay. I said, number one, what is the meaning of Tawheed? Number two, tell me how many sunnah, salah, rak'ah are in a day. How many salah, sunnah should we pray in a day? I said, if you can't do that, then at least tell me what are the number of all the rak'ahs, of all the fard salah in one day. You know how many of those they could answer? 0. I said, so stop playing games with me. Stop playing games with these people. You were never a Muslim. If you don't understand Tawheed and you're telling me you're an Azhari scholar, and you can't even tell me how many sunnah rak'ahs in a day, you can't even tell me how many salah, how many rak'ahs to pray for Fajr, Maghrib, Isha and Asr. So just get out of here with this foolishness. So they're pretty much rubbish, but they get their understanding from this guy. And this guy, Kenneth Craig, wrote in this book called The Call of the Minaret. I read this book many times. He said, not so the New Testament. There is condensation and editing. How many of you know what condensation is? Somebody give me a definition of condensation. The conversion of steam to water, right? The conversion of all of this steam compresses itself down. All of the molecules that make it light enough to float then are taken out so that it can become water, correct? That's the rudimentary understanding of condensation. So he said the Bible came through a process of condensation and editing. Condensation and editing. There is choice reproduction. What does that word choice reproduction means? It means that I reproduce what I choose. In my copying, I choose and I pick what I reproduce. And witness. There's choice witness. I decide to listen to and not listen to. The Gospels have come through the mind of the church behind the authors. This is the Christian Anglican Bishop of Jerusalem, that the Bible came from the minds of the church behind the authors. What does that mean to you? That means that people wrote what everyone was thinking. They wrote what people inspired them to write. What the church was believing, they made what they wrote fit into this. And let me tell you, the author of Luke says this. If you read the book of Luke, in the beginning of Luke, he says, I wrote that which was seeming to me. I wrote that which sounded good. That's what he says. I wrote what sounds good. And actually, he was copying from Mark anyway. He just pick and chose. That's what it means by there is choice, reproduction, and witness. Because most Matthew and Luke, without a doubt, and you can find it right here from the sources, copied from Mark. In a lot of places they copied verbatim. They sometimes, in order, you can't plagiarize Mark because then it's the same book. So what is one of the biggest tricks of plagiarism? What do? No, you copy and paste and you shuffle the arrangement. You shuffle the arrangement. This is what you find in Matthew and Luke. And then sometimes you change the wording so that it does not look plagiarized. But to anyone who knows plagiarism, they'll pick it up right away. And almost all of the biblical scholars of Astute have said that Matthew and Luke are a plagiarism of Mark. And Mark was copying from a text we know as the Q document, which does not exist anymore, but it's a reference that some of the early church fathers like Eusebius referred to, that they said Mark got his information. Subhanallah